Okay, so we're going to talk about the greatest nation on earth with the best democracy ever. What, you don't believe me? I mean, Jong Un got 100% of the vote in the last election, that free democratic election. That's amazing to have that much support for such a great leader. Anyway, well, all sarcasm aside, North Korea. How much of a threat is North Korea really? How much of a boogeyman are they that the West makes them out to be? How realistically threatening are they? How where do they really stand in the world? Well, North Korea is something that I've always kind of kept my eye on, even since when I was a youngster. Uh, right after World War II, we pretty much bounced ourselves right into some little island called, or some little, peninsula called North Korea, so to speak. And people didn't really know where North Korea was. I mean, they didn't even know why we went there. And it was also known as the Forgotten War. But the North Korean, basically, in short, is Southern Chinese. That's the way I look at it. It's when the communist Chinese started to run south or southeast, I guess you'd say. Uh, that's when trouble started, and then of course we had a big conflict, and then of course it came to a stalemate at the 38th, 39th parallel, 38th parallel. I forget which parallel, but anyway, you get the idea. And ever since then, it's pretty much been just an armistice. The war is still on. It's an armistice, not a actual ceasefire. So that means from time to time, North Korea gets a little bit spunky and fires artillery shells into the south, and vice versa, and stuff like that. Look at those tactical tractors, cool. Tactical rocket tractors. You want to plow a field, you do it North Korean style. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the point is that the tensions stayed the same pretty much since back then. Since the 1950s, and so did the people. The people really haven't come out of that era. North Korea. Little known fact is they usually win Earth Hour every year because there's like so little hydro. The people there live in absolute misery, and the brainwashing, stuff like that. So these people are pretty much doomed in a really weird kind of world where they're still stuck in a they're stuck in it's like they're stuck frozen in time in the 1950s, 1960s kind of thing, and they haven't really moved forward. They can't really move forward because of the repressive government that they actually have. Now, this is more about their military might, so to speak, what they have. I've kind of glazed over some of the numbers just to give you an idea. They basically, their manpowers. If you're 17 years, they don't care what your genitalia is. You're pretty much going to be drafted. If you're draftable, if they consider you draftable. Available for military service is about 6.5 million males, age 15 to 29 in 2010, and about 6.4 million females, 15 to 29 in 2010. So that's the average age for their military. Fit for military service is 4 million, we'll say 5 million people. Okay, males, or 4,800,000 males, 15 to 29 as of 2010, 5.2 million females, 15 to 29. Interesting that they have more females in the military there. Reaching military annual age is about 2 million males, 2,700,000 males, that type of thing. Active service personnel, about 1.1 million as of uh, 2012, ranked fifth. So they have people that are available for the military, and then they have people in the military. Reserve personnel, about 600,000 reservists, 5.8 million paramilitary as of 2012, ranked first. Now, their paramilitaries are pretty sparse. So these numbers, again, what their actual manpower is versus what they have, people walking around with, pretty much rusted out AKs and SKSs, that type of thing, that's going to vary. The tanks, and all that stuff, I kind of forget some of the numbers. I looked at it earlier today and I forgot to save it, but it goes something like this. You're looking at about 1,000, just a little under 1,000 military aircraft. About 500, a little under 500, are frontline fighters, if you can call them a frontline fighter. Although they do have MiG-29s, which they're older generation MiG-29s, most obviously. But that's still, in the hands of a good pilot, could be a threat. Their like MiG 29s, MiG 17s, some old Chinese J like JG 10s or whatever those things. They're basically hand me down from the Chinese and hand me down from the Soviets. Is pretty much the stuff they use. Anything that's probably built in North Korea is pretty much. I mean, they're still using 1950s equipment and stuff like that for the most of the military. Their navy is the same thing. It's pretty much dilapidated. It's they do again. The equipment is old. It doesn't mean it doesn't pose a threat. Of course, it poses a threat, but against a modern day superpower, they'd have, they have about 5,000 tanks, about roughly 5,000 personnel carriers, and mobile rocket infantry, that type of thing. You send in a team of 2A6 or 2A7 Leopards in there, a battalion of those, they'd have a field day in there. It'd be like, oh, look, there's another one to blow up. Doesn't mean they wouldn't be dangerous. I mean, the North Koreans have proven their battle worthiness before. The thing is that they're so outdated in technology that you could pretty much fly over with a bunch of Apache helicopters and, again, a few Abrams tanks, or the I think it's the K-20 or the K-200, I think, or tank that South Korea has. Basically, it's like a T-90 bottom chassis with a Leopard 2A5 top end turret on it, and basically they would have a field day in there. The South Korean army may be smaller, but it's much more modernized. Their troops actually have body armor, stuff like that. So the North Koreans, one of the things they would be completely like in the first Korean War that we had with them. I mean, I think something like 85% of all North Koreans were killed by artillery. And it usually went something like this. You had a handful of guys on a hill somewhere. Next thing, about 5 to 10,000 North Koreans come running at you, but only a tenth of them are armed. And one guy dies, the next guy picks up the rifle, and he runs and fights until he dies. Then the next guy picks up the rifle, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's basically the old Soviet kind of overwhelm them with numbers. And it did work to a point, and it could still work. However, against a modernized military with modernized air power, it would be very, very difficult for the North Koreans to pull this off. That said, numbers, quantity is a quality of its own. And the thing is that with the amount of people they have, a ground to kind of fisticuffs kind of fight, they would put up a hell of a fight. I have no doubt the loyalty that they would fight, because again, if they turn around, they get shot by their own guys, right? So there is no treat, and we know just from world wars, World War II, Vietnam, all these places, that the Asians do tend to fight a little bit. They do tend to commit to their fight. The idea of retreat, no retreat, no surrender. In World War II, for example, when sometimes GIs and stuff like that and other allies would surrender to the Japanese were like, we don't understand. What are they doing? What kind of crazy military tactic is this? Surrender? Like they could not grasp the concept of surrender, because it was more glorious to die in battle. Well, the North Koreans kind of the same idea. Again, especially when they're brainwashed to that level, and even the ones that are not brainwashed to that level and understand what they're actually in, they know they can't retreat. If they retreat, they get shot for treason, right? So, if they're lucky, they get shot for treason. North Korean prisons aren't exactly known as hospitable places. You don't get your three squares, and you definitely do what you're told. In fact, in some North Korean prisons, what they'll do is they'll get the prisoners to hold a very oddball pose, like in a crouching position or stand on one foot, that type of thing, or whatever. And if they have to stand like that for hours, and if they don't, they get a massive beatdown. So it's just they beat the psychology out of you, so to speak. That said, as a modern day threat to humanity, yes, North Korea may possibly have a mobile nuke, and they do have these missiles that they yeah, they're nukes. I would say they're probably technology-wise, because nobody really know. Even the Chinese don't really know much about this country. Like, they're so secretive and stuff like that. But most of the stuff is old, so that anything that they're going to manufacture is probably going to be made out of like construed aluminum and cast iron. All joking aside, but they're going to be making things pretty crudely. So their strategic missile forces and stuff like that. Yes, they do test ballistic rockets and missiles that are capable of reaching the United States and stuff like that. But they their launch pads and stuff like that, the difficulties of launching these kind of rockets and missiles, I mean, they'd be taken out before they could ever launch them. Um, every time North Korea puts one of these things up for test, it takes them like a week to set the rocket up. You know what I mean? Like it's just not something you could really viably use as a threat to other countries. And there's no way they can set them up without people detecting them. Number one, they're big. Number two, there's always an eye on them via satellite. So if you could take out the satellites, then they might get the upper hand. Look, Hitler's Peenemund V1 rockets. At least you could set those things up in a couple hours, and they were fast, unstoppable, and even if they were low tech, they still kind of worked no matter what, and they could set them up within a reasonable amount of time. Anywhere from a few hours to a day or so. Where the North Korean ballistic missiles are, again, takes them a week to set them up, and a lot of them kind of collapse and blow up in big. I mean, it must put on a hell of a show, especially during the winter months. It's the best time to have a rocket blow up. It's probably the only source of heat half those soldiers will ever experience during the winter there, just because they're so poor. But you get the idea that it's not practical. Now, their mobile missiles, this new KN-08 mobile missile launcher, which you have to understand, the North Koreans and the Chinese have done this too. Again, the North Koreans kind of take their lead from the Chinese. The Chinese use the North Korea as the kind of crazy brother of China. It's like the useful idiot to China. And one of the things that the Chinese used to do, they don't do as much anymore because they actually are building stuff. But the North Koreans do it, is they'll parade these massive missiles on display. But if you get good photos of them and close-up looks at them, you could tell that they're either paper mache or painted over tin. That said, considering the technology that they have, considering the manufacturing they would have, a 1960s style Soviet rocket would probably be the kind of technology you would see again with the tactical rocket launcher tractors. That's pretty awesome. I mean, it'd go off-road, there's no question on there. But anyway, back to the story here. But the idea is that, just because it's crudely made doesn't mean it's fake. But they have been known to make paper mache rockets and stuff like that just as mock-ups to put on a good parade. And a classic Soviet tactic is get everybody to parade around the square 4 times, make it look like you have 4 times of the forces what you actually have. That said, they do have a lot of people on parade. Now, that said, how good is their training? I don't know. I can imagine they would be, again, obviously hand-to-hand combat, they would probably be pretty proficient for the average person. Their nerve, again, we don't know, but I mean, they have, again, these people do fire, live artillery rounds into South Korea, knowing that, and then, say, get ready for the big war, guys, we're gonna, go out in glory type of thing. I mean, it's probably done just more tension, it's like a temper tantrum, but, with artillery. So, so they do that. But I mean, if the South Koreans ever decided to invade the North, I think the North would be screwed for the most part. Yes, the numbers are on the side of the North, but the technology. I mean, again, those the South Korean tanks would have a field day with the North Korean tanks, even if there's more North Korean tanks. The Apache helicopters would have a field day there. It'd be just like, again, oh, rockets, the numbers would account for nothing. Because remember, but at the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea, there's still landmines there from the 1950s. And in North Korea, they put landmines there all the time, to freshen them up. So there's so many landmines, nobody can cross that thing. It's just, it's even an anti-mine machine has a hard time because it's all mud, it's all, it's a gully, it's just a nasty place to try to cross, right? And the thing is that plus you'd be getting shot at while you're trying to do this. There are stories of people who get through that minefield to escape the North. I mean, many people get blown up trying to do this, but it's amazing some of the escape attempts, kind of like what you've seen with the Berlin Wall, East Germany, West Germany type of thing. Extraordinary escapes, people, hiding themselves in tires. It's incredible stories. There was a lady that got out. They folded her up into a briefcase, or not a briefcase, but like a suitcase, and it was a small suitcase. Like, this girl was like contortionist extraordinaire. Mind you, she was pretty young, so you know, I'm sure she probably pulled a few muscles trying to squinch into this thing, but the rest of her life, I'm sure she healed. Not only had lots of time to heal physically, but emotionally from living in those kind of conditions. That said, cannibalism in North Korea is again, these people are dirt poor. The government, they eat caviar. The people, they'll get shot if they eat bugs because they're government, they're government bugs, and you have to have sanctions to eat government bugs or something. But yeah, and in North Korea too, every 2 weeks the citizens are basically told to um, report on each other. They have to go to, I don't know if it happens everywhere because again, population size and everything like that, but they basically have to go to like a place like a government or a government sanctioned place, confess something that they did wrong, and rat out two other people. So you get the idea of how much of a paranoid regime this is. That said, their rocket forces basically look like the Katyusha rockets or Stalin's orchestra is what they used to call them. You're seeing these things being used in Ukraine right now. They're basically a truck with about anywhere from 20 to 50 rockets, weighing 100 pounds, whatever each, and they fire a couple of miles or a few kilometers or whatever, and they're not really that accurate. But if you want to barrage an area, that's what you use. Slow to reload, but they're very mobile. They're small, and you can pretty much set them up anywhere, and they're easy to use. And North Korea has lots of those. They have about 2,500 of those. Again, with the navies, their old submarines, stuff like that, there's nothing they have that can't be easily detected. But it doesn't mean it's no good. It just means the captain has to be twice as smart to outgun somebody. And I've always find it funny when people look at like regimes like this and completely underestimate their abilities. I'm sure to invade North Korea would be a hell of a fight for on you would take losses. There's no no doubts about that. But I think they would lose. They get wiped out in the process just because, again, almost all their stuff is analog. But the nice thing about analog is it doesn't run out of batteries. It works low tech. It works no matter what. And it works in bad weather and it works in cold weather. And that, I think, is one of the advantages they have. So the psychology, I think these people would probably fight like a bunch of bastards, I'm sure. To me, the best forces ever on the history of armed conflict, so to speak, has got to be at all times the Viet Cong. Nobody can beat the Viet Cong. Yes, they died in mass numbers, but we're talking about, and this is something that U.S. military analysts looked at right after the Vietnam War, was how did we get our asses handed to us by guys basically barefoot with pockets full of rice with rusted out AKs, running barefoot through a jungle, moving artillery and things with donkeys and bicycles on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. How did they do that? How are these guys kind of? Well, number one, the psychology. You couldn't break these guys mentally. I mean, these guys are pretty hardcore. So that's the one thing. Number two, they were traveling through a jungle, their jungle. They knew that jungle. They knew what they could eat to survive. They knew what how to find fresh water. So they were able to travel extremely light. So right after that, you had things like the SAS. They learned from the Viet Cong. They actually went in years after and got training from this. How did these guys do that? They learned how to. I mean, the Viet Cong would sneak up on a position. Not one guy, but like 1,000 guys would sneak up on a position on their bellies in the middle of the night, and next thing they just run over top of you. And they would catch so many positions off guard like that, and they just couldn't figure out how the heck are these guys so good at what they did. They'd take a day just to cross a rice paddy on their belly. You know what I mean? Like they were so committed to their cause. That's what made them so good. These guys were mentally hard. That I think is the first thing. And then if they had enough ammo, they could make a difference. I think the North Koreans would probably be like that. It's just I don't think they could get far. The reason why they can't get far is because, again, they're limited by the technology. Even if their best fighter is going to be the MiG-29 most likely, or their variant of MiG-29. But even at that, they got a 600-mile range. So they're never going to be like a world-conquering power in that sense. So, when you hear that, North Korea is going to wipe out the West, even if they could fire one or two nukes, again, the idea that, yes, they could build the mobile rocket launchers, yes, they can enrich uranium, but to build a mass force of nuclear weapons, like Topol-M, for example, like the Russians have, the Russians only have a handful of those. It's enough to get the job done. Don't kid yourself. The Russians have a lot, and the Russians are miles and miles and miles ahead um, of the North Koreans, and just slightly behind the United States military wise. And when you look at it between the U.S. and Russia, for example, I would say the Russians are still pretty crude and still, on average, their stuff is behind on the states, but not that far, But like North Korea is like really far behind in that type of stuff, so that's a good thing. So the biggest thing they have is manpower, uh, and that's about it. Weapons, it's again, they got like tactical tractors and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Don't get me wrong. Artillery is always a problem. The rockets would be a problem, but I think again, air power in there for a week, it'd be like Saddam's army. You pretty much take everything out within a month. I mean, Saddam had 15,000 APCs and tanks and what like 10,000 tanks, but most of the stuff was substandard. Even though the North Koreans use probably older Chinese like Type 98 tanks and stuff like that, which are basically a T-72 or T-80s. They also have T-80s. T-80 is a good tank, but the ones from 1982 are not quite as good as the ones, they're dated. So almost all their tanks don't have reactive armor, meaning again a one-shot kill from a Leopard tank or an Abrams tank or a Leclerc tank or a Challenger tank. Again, a British Challenger tank would have a field day in North Korea. They'd be like, "Are they shooting at us, or is it raining?" That type of thing. That said, I'm sure the North Koreans have some pretty powerful anti-tank weapons as well, but most of it's like RPG-7. RPG-7 is not going to do much damage against a Challenger tank. Same with the Leopard tanks. Again, these guys would have field day in there, especially if they had Apache helicopters flying around, flying cap for them. I mean, the Apache helicopters, the pilots would be just having a field day. They'd just be like, they'd take out the artillery. The biggest problem would be taking out the manpower, just because it'd be like swatting flies, or swatting ants on an anthill, that type of thing. But that's what artillery's for, right? So I don't know. I don't think the North would get very, very far unless you were fighting on their terms, basically manpower. Now, if the North ever did decide to make a bust for the South, I think the civilian population would get their asses handed to them pretty quick. But the thing is that the South Korean military, they're again numbers wise they're not quite as big, but they're pretty much using U.S. military technology. Plus you have the U.S. military station there. I mean, the F-15s are gonna, and A-10s would have a field day again, flying over North Korea. In fact, I'm sure most of them would, welcome it. Just like, okay, well, but then they'd have to go home, right? It's like, ah, crap, we lost all that military funding. I mean, the whole conflict in North Korea, South Korea really makes no sense at all. Unless you look at who's the big brother, China. Well, South Korea is a pain in the ass for China. They play well together for the most part. They ignore each other in peace. But the thing is that when you look at it, the U.S. has Patriot missile systems in South Korea. They have them in Taiwan. They have them in Japan. They have them in the Philippines. So the idea is to, North Korea is never the number one target. Again, that's just the useful idiot. And when they throw a tantrum from time to time, threatening to destroy the brink of humanity, they make good news headlines. But in reality, North Korea, even with their mobile missile launchers, even if they had the 5,600 to 6,000 mile range or 9 to 10,000 kilometer range on them, there's only going to be a handful of these things. Deadly where they hit, but the thing is chances are, being 1960s Soviet era type rockets that they're going to be using anyway in this technology, it's very defeatable. So as long as you detect it quick enough, like they'll never get a launch out, So that said, never underestimate. You never know. Launching from a mobile launcher, rocket launcher, in North Korea to try to hit the, Californian coast, there's not you're not going to lose too much sleep over that. However, that same even low tech missile being launched right off the coast of California from a undercover frigate, or a freighter. That's what people are more worried about, is the freighter effect. Basically, Iran, Russia, China, all these countries, they had this idea to disguise, particularly North Korea, had an idea of disguising a freighter, and have basically these missiles not to destroy infrastructure, but to fire a nuclear missile above the United States over populated areas and detonate the nuke there to create an electromagnetic pulse, which you see right now. The scramble to Cheyenne Mountain, back to Cheyenne Mountain, with the the current making of this video, where the United States is starting to hide sensitive NORAD equipment in Cheyenne Mountain because it's EMP proof. The United States does realize how vulnerable the grid is. Again, you take down a power grid got taken down by in the States by a branch a few years back, and that wiped it. New York pretty much went into freaking looting mode right away. So the chaos of an EMP, was very evident even back then. A great book that was written. I never read the book from the author, but I heard him speak a lot of times. I can't remember the guy's name now, but 1 second after, and that's what the North Koreans are after, is that 1 second after an EMP, where everything just you fry out the grid. And if they could achieve that, they would be happy. Mind you, they would be dead the next day because of the retaliation. Most military equipment, U.S. military equipment, not all, but a lot of it is basically EMP proof, particularly the high tech stuff. Not all of it, but there's always stuff that's kept in bunkers and stuff like that. The Russians do this, the Americans do this, pretty much everybody does this. They always keep a handful of stuff in underground EMP proof bunkers, so that if it all goes awry, at least you can pop up with the stuff after and still have a fighting chance, right? But again, I think it'll be a long time before we have to worry about North Korean missile boats firing on us in in our waters up here in Canada, or even to the south of me in the States. But I thought it was an interesting video to make. Now, something that was interesting to note, just to give you an idea of this whole North Korean kind of thing, is when the big Sony hack, and they said, "Oh, North Korea hacked Sony," but I mean that's completely preposterous. I mean, these people are pretty much in the Stone Age. Again, when the DMZ came up, that basically, the South moved forward, the North didn't. And they're still living in that they're caught in time. I mean, they're frozen in time. Now, one thing that to keep in mind too is that also with North Korea, like, again, really, why are we there? What's what threat do they really pose to us? Well, they don't pose a threat to us. They pose a threat to South Korea. But again, why are we even in that conflict? Like 50 years ago, why are we even there? And you get the same, oh, we're there for the the women and children, democracy and stuff like that. No, it's there because the U.S. interest is that you can put U.S. bases there if you ever have to fight China. It's already nice to have a landing bridge, and that's what South Korea. That's South Korea's true value, is that it's a place to stage an attack from, retaliation, that type of thing. So I guess with that, there's not much more I could really say. Again, the numbers of how many people they actually have, how many fighters, how many stuff like that, it varies from year to year. How much is actual and active duty, how much is actual mothballed, and how much of it is actually, again, almost all their armor is like their tanks or APCs. Almost none of it has reactive armor, so I don't think everything's kind of like a one-shot kill for a Leopard tank or Abrams tank or whatever. It doesn't mean they wouldn't get any wins at all, but I think, because again, they got the numbers on their side. But again, it'd be to their detriment, because the technology, the radar, it doesn't mean they don't have stuff. It doesn't mean they don't catch people. South Korean spies are quite legendary. Some of the pen guns and stuff like that. Yeah, it's definitely can do a lot of damage, but I don't think it's it's not going to be an empire of the world anytime soon. I mean, heck, they don't. Again, the reason why they win Earth Hour every year is because they don't have any infrastructure, so don't have to worry about them taking over. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The movie Red Dawn, not the first one, but the second one. The first one, it was the Russians and the Venezuelans that came in and invaded America in Red Dawn 1, right? And that was, again, stoking the Red Terror, kind of thing. And then in the second Red Dawn movie, they were going to use the Chinese. Now, here's the thing. The Chinese didn't like that. So that's why they moved in the second Red Dawn movie, that they made the invaders North Korean, just so that it was less provocative to China. So you think about it this way. Okay, we're going to make a movie, and oh, it's offending China. Well, China can actually do so. I don't think they would go to war over a movie, but it's like, okay, well, we want to keep the relations with China. North Korea, screw them. They'll be the bad guy for this for this movie, that type of thing. Eh? So that easy, it's that easy, yeah, yeah. And then I think the North Koreans came out, yeah, we're going to blow up the world for making us a bad guy in the movie. Because you think we're bad guys, we're going to blow you up. I gotta love Kim Jong Un. Yep. What a crazy man. What a crazy man. Comedy and insanity all wrapped in one. Could it get any better, right? But you really got to feel for the people from the north, because who would ever want to live under that kind of a tyranny? You can't. I don't think there's a worse place on earth that a person could possibly live. And in fact, a lot of North Korean people that do escape, they usually don't know how to, like. They get into the south, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to function in society because they're so terrified that they might break a rule. I mean, it's very, very sad. And the strangest thing is, how can places like that exist? How can it, that kind of mentality exist? It just boggles the mind. But I guess, everybody's cut from a different cloth, right? uh, so that's just the way it goes. So I don't know what else I can really say about the military might of the North Koreans. Again, it would be a hassle. Yes, these people would come over the line pretty fast. It'd be a big death toll, but I put my money on the South Koreans before the North Koreans. However, I do believe the North Koreans would be very, very committed to their fight if they ever got into it, because we've already seen how they fought the first time. And I don't think they've had a lot more training since then. So again, Canada fought there, Australia fought there, the United States fought there, Britain fought there, everybody fought there, and it just came to a stalemate. So that tells you. But you have to understand the technology we were using at the time really wasn't that much better than theirs back in the 1950s, when everything was still analog. Yeah, our stuff was slightly better built and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't that much better. I mean, legendary dogfights between the F-86 Sabre and the MiG-15, and then later the MiG-17, stuff like that, and then of course the MiG-21s. MiG-21s were always kind of the hot dog of the area of that time, but they're still flying the same stuff. If you had like CF-18s going there or F-18s going there now, I mean, it would just, well, they would never get close enough. Now their MiG-29s, how good are their MiG-29s? How good are their missiles? That I don't know. How good are their pilots? I don't know. But considering that you have at best 500 frontline fighters for the North Koreans, I don't think they'd have more than a handful of MiG-29s there. So even if even if they had the best MiG-29s, which they probably have like first, second, or third generation MiG-29, probably not the fifth generation stuff now. So even if they had fifth generation MiG-29s in there and expert pilots, they have 500 against tens of thousands of fighters that would be coming in to destroy them from several different nations. They wouldn't have a chance. And even if just the South were fighting with them, well, the South can be replenished by would replenish the North Koreans by the states and stuff like that. They'd be flying F-15s in there, what have you. Now, yes, China could support North Korea a bit. We have to understand the North Koreans and the Chinese, like, I mean, oftentimes, like, the Chinese will catch people sneaking in from North Korea and they send them back. Like, they won't have anything to do with the country. They just want them there as a useful idiot. In fact, the North Koreans are actually get mad at the Chinese from time to time because of the idea that they're not as dedicated to the Communist Party as they should be. But the Chinese, they play a different game. In fact, the whole politics between Kim Jong-un, I mean, the man basically had his aunt and uncle executed for treason, and those aunt and uncle were really kind of running the show behind the scenes for China. And now it's kind of like, now you have just kind of China, the ties are kind of cut. They're like, okay, well, who's driving the boat? You know what I mean? You got Kim Jong Un in there, and I'm sure that at some point they're going to knock him off. If it gets too far out of control, because the real threat for China is that North Korea gets too out of hand, and then you have, basically, if the NATO and South Korea and the United States all get in there and decide to steamroll over the top of North Korea, then China has another problem on its border. It'll have Patriot missile systems in North Korea basing. Don't think it could happen? I think it could happen pretty fast. Again, take 500 Apache helicopters, 20 B-52s. A B-52 will level. They won't have a single light bulb left there. B-52s would level that area pretty quick, and then just run in, about 1,000 tanks. Uh, even if they were outnumbered 4-1, just the technology that the FLIR systems, the laser rangefinders, that type of thing, doesn't mean that North Koreans don't have any of that. They have some of it, but it's just they don't. Reactive armor. I mean, that type of stuff really goes a long way. Body armor, that goes a long way. The artillery exchanges. Yes, they do have a lot of mobile rocket launchers, stuff like that. But those things, as soon as you fire them, if you might as well run away from the thing, because if there's an Apache in the air, they're going to see exactly where those rockets came from, and you'll fire it once, and if you lose one each time, uh, again, they'd have a field day in there. That's what I'm saying. So whenever you hear about North Korea, starting a war, they could start a war, but it's more the China that you have to realistically look at as the threat, not North Korea. And I don't think China would go to bat for North Korea. However, I don't think China would let anybody get um, into North Korea that far, because again, it's more of a threat to China, and China would take action. Again, that's who the North Koreans technically are, is the Chinese when they decided to take over, right? So with that, you can look at North Korea is to China kind of like what the Ukraine was to Russia, what Israel is to the United States. So that's kind of how if you look at it kind of in those contexts, you get an idea of what's going on there. Other than that, I mean, not much is really known about North Korea, other than that's a horrible, horrible place for people to live, where they have to resort to cannibalism, just to feed themselves. Uh, Brutal, brutal dictatorship, public executions. I'm sure some of the stuff that you hear, like Kim Jong Un feeding his, uh, his uncle to like wild dogs. Okay, they came out and said that was a joke. Okay, yeah, but he did have them executed. So the idea of this man having people executed in a public square is not not something that didn't happen. It's not unheard of. Yes, it is that evil of a regime. Um, okay, maybe he didn't have the person ripped apart by dogs, but the concentration camps, I mean, the amount of political prisoners they have there is unbelievable, and of course the starvation, it's just devastating. Just a really shame stain on humanity, you know what I mean? But anyway, I guess that's the way it goes. So, since I was a kid, we always had the North Korean threat and stuff like that. The big thing that they play off with the North Korea right now is kind of how they're going to use an EMP or cyber attacks. I don't think the North Koreans really have the abilities to do massive cyber attacks. They probably have some, but if the cyber attacks are coming from anywhere, they're going to be coming from China. They're not going to be coming from North Korea. Again, North Korea is still stuck in the 50s. I'm sure they have some modernization there, but not very much. Again, they fear technology. They're stuck in time. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Thank you very much to everybody who has. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. And remember, while you're listening to the show, be careful. You might just learn something. Have yourselves a great day, eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, so we're going to talk about the greatest nation on earth with the best democracy ever. What, you don't believe me? I mean, Kim Jong-un got 100% of the vote in the last election, that free democratic election. That's amazing to have that much support for such a great leader. Anyway, well, all sarcasm aside, North Korea. How much of a threat is North Korea really? How much of a boogeyman are they that the West makes them out to be? How realistically threatening are they? How where do they really stand in the world? Well, North Korea is something that I've always kind of kept my eye on, even since when I was a youngster. Uh, right after World War II, we pretty much bounced ourselves right into some little island or some little, peninsula called North Korea, so to speak. And people didn't really know where North Korea was. I mean, they didn't even know why we went there. And it was also known as the Forgotten War. But the North Korean, basically, in short, is Southern Chinese. That's the way I look at it. It's when the communist Chinese started to run south or southeast, I guess you'd say. That's when trouble started, and then of course we had a big conflict, and then of course it came to a stalemate at the 38th, 39th parallel, 38th parallel. I forget which parallel, but anyway, you get the idea. And ever since then, it's pretty much been just an armistice. The war is still on. It's an armistice, not a actual ceasefire. So that means from time to time, North Korea gets a little bit spunky and fires artillery shells into the south, and vice versa, and stuff like that. Look at those tactical tractors, cool. Tactical rocket tractors. You want to plow a field, you do it North Korean style. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the point is that the tensions stayed the same pretty much since back then. You know, since the 1950s. And so did the people. The people really haven't come out of that era. North Korea, little known fact is they usually win Earth Hour every year because there's like so little hydro. The people there live in absolute misery, and the brainwashing, stuff like that. So these people are pretty much doomed in a really weird kind of world where they're still stuck in a they're stuck in it's like they're stuck frozen in time in the 1950s 1960s kind of thing, and they haven't really moved forward. They can't really move forward because of the repressive government that they actually have now. This is more about their military might, so to speak, what they have. I've kind of glazed over some of the numbers just to give you an idea. They basically their manpowers. If you're 17 years, they don't care what your genitalia is. You're pretty much going to be drafted. If you're draftable, if they consider you draftable. Available for military service is about 6.5 million males, age 15 to 29 in 2010, and about 6.4 million females, 15 to 29 in 2010. So that's the average age for their military. Fit for military service is 4 million, we'll say 5 million people, okay, males, or 4,800,000 males, 15 to 29 as of 2010, 5.2 million females, 15 to 29. Interesting that they have more females in the military there. Reaching military annual age is about 2 million males, 2,700,000 males, that type of thing. Active service personnel, about 1.1 million as of 2012, ranked 5th. So they have people that are available for the military, and then they have people in the military. Reserve personnel, about 600,000 reservists, 5.8 million paramilitary as of 2012, ranked 1st. Now, their paramilitaries are pretty sparse. So these numbers, again, what their actual manpower is versus what they have, people walking around with, pretty much rusted out AKs and SKSs, that type of thing, that's going to vary. The tanks, the and all that stuff, I kind of forget some of the numbers. I looked at it earlier today and I forgot to save it, but it goes something like this. You're looking at about 1,000, just a little under 1,000 military aircraft. About 500, a little under 500 are frontline fighters, if you can call them a frontline fighter. Although they do have MiG-29s, which they're older generation MiG-29s, most obviously. But that's still, in the hands of a good pilot, could be a threat. They're fly, like MiG-29s, MiG-17s, some old Chinese JG-10s or whatever, those things. They're basically, hand-me-down from the Chinese and hand-me-down from the Soviets, is pretty much the stuff they use. Anything that's probably built in North Korea is pretty much, they're still using, 1950s equipment and stuff like that for most of the military. Their Navy is the same thing. It's pretty much dilapidated. They do, again, the equipment is old. It doesn't mean it doesn't pose a threat. Of course it poses a threat.